It is a great honour to be leading this tribute to my late father, Dr Michael Kirton, to such an august, informed and international audience, all coming together to celebrate 45 years of his life's work. I hope today to give you a flavour of the man behind adaptation innovation theory, plus a little history on how it was devised, developed, researched and came to be used worldwide in a wide range of applications. My father's start in life was a humble one and a difficult one. Early on, he suffered from serious illness, separation of his parents, poverty, and consequently being uprooted from England to spend his childhood in a foreign country, Malta. However, it was clear from the off that he had a very astute, challenging and inquiring mind, which got him into almost as much trouble as it managed to get him out of. He won a scholarship to the prestigious Lyceum in Malta, which ignited a lifelong passion for learning. There he was schooled by Jesuit priests who, unusually for the 1930s, taught through questioning and debate rather than rote learning and long essays. This suited a young, exceptionally bright boy who, if he'd lived in different times, would have been diagnosed with dyslexia and almost certainly with Asperger's syndrome as well. Here he was given the freedom to question everything, and there were no restrictions on his imagination. For those who are familiar with the Jesuit teaching method, they had a system of debate called devil's advocate, in which everything was questioned from every angle, and he was taught to question every assumption that led to certain conclusions or beliefs. The country itself, Malta, was full of history, from megalithic temples right through to the Knights of St John of Templar fame. Perhaps this is where he got his fascination for archaeology and an insatiable interest in military history. The Jesuits were so impressed with my father's intellect that, very unusually, they offered to pay for his training to go into the priesthood. And this might have happened, but for two things. The first was that their very own system of debate led him to question his faith in Christianity. But secondly, the outbreak of the Second World War. Malta was put under siege by the Germans, and the people there started to starve. My father was technically too young to sign up, but he did so anyway. He wanted to help in the war effort. Malnourished due to the siege, small in stature and only 16 years of age, they found him a uniform small enough and nicknamed him Junior. Here are some of his experiences in his own words. Thanks to Dr Rob Sheffield for recording my father's words shortly before his death. He talks here about his life in the Royal Air Force and how it helped him begin to forming some of his ideas about leadership and teamwork.
Because of the war and getting money from Britain was very difficult. My mother was in difficulty. We just had to manage as best we could. What then happened was that when I went into the service, I went in not the right amount of money, the lowest rank. But what again was happening is there were people who were willing to take me on under any circumstance simply because I was willing, and 3 or 4 people who refused point blank immediately because I wasn't old enough. When I joined the Air Force, first of all, I had to have a certificate from school because I lost my birth certificate, and the publication, the passport was enough. But they needed some support. And the two people who gave me support said, Kirton can take this place. He will be useful, and he creates more problems that the enemy won't like. When I went to my first job, it was washing down an aeroplane. While I was washing down an aeroplane, a very senior officer who was walking past looked at me in surprise, because I looked a bit young, and said to me, "What made you come here?" And I said, "The Germans." And he laughed, and he said, "Well, what are you going to do about it?" And I said, "We'll get him down." And he said, "But what jobs can you want to do?" I said, "Anything going." And he was curious about this. He then said, "Very well." And at this point, I said, "Well, I'm going to become a doctor at some stage, if I could find the money, or my mother could find the money." So I did it in Latin, and he nodded his head and moved me into the orderly room. And that began the problems with them. Next, what I did was to rearrange some of the files that I was organising in what I thought was a better system. That infuriated the man who was immediately above me, but it didn't. The man who was immediately above him. And that began my life. What I discovered was that some people solved the problems as they were expected to do, and some people solved the problem as they thought it ought to be done.
I wonder if you're both being supported by the boss and being at a junior level gave you a safe space to try things, to experiment.
Actually, it turned out to be very dangerous, because one of the things is I collected enemies fairly fast, and they arranged for me to do work which was ordinary until somebody came along and it changed again. Anyway, I kept being warned not to make my jokes. When a field marshal came to inspect the place, he was told that I was a local who had joined, and he lifted an eyebrow. He said, "Well, how do you get on with this?" And I said, "I'm determined that we win." He said, "Oh, we all are. Why you?" And I said, "They kept missing me, and I got angrier and angrier every time I was bombed." He found that funny too. One of the things that I was immediately told was to go and tidy up some things which were happening there, because we were moving back into the headquarters before the Italians attacked us. And I went into the headquarters, and there on the wall, left over from long ago, was a map of the Mediterranean, which was partly burnt, but was stuck to the wall. And it had marks on it of where the planes, our planes, could go and come in to land. And I thought, we're acquiring this now. I'd seen this map elsewhere, so I went and got it and changed it over. They were amazed. "Why did you do that? That map is wasted." And I said, "No, sir. I promised to give it to another command." And eventually, my senior burst into laughter and said, "He needs to be nearer to the enemy." And I was sent to Italy. Then I began to notice for a long time that officers, there were a major group of officers who believed they knew how things operated. You did it their way or ran into trouble. And because I had been bred in Malta and not fitted, and a junior person in the Air Force who didn't quite fit, I offered suggestions to my chiefs that weren't safe. And so it went on, and I realised time after time that I could be right, but I was wrong in saying so. Because I went into different countries, doing different jobs, being given jobs which were almost beyond me, and in other cases where the job was taken from me. And I think this package left behind a person who was calculating all the time. And essentially, it began to break through into here, and that is the team you're working with is vital. It contains differences within the team to cover all that's required. But in an engineering unit, the accountant is hated. In the accounting unit, the engineering is an idiot, and so it goes on. I was learning about thinking long before I went to university even, and there was a number of reasons why that was, but mainly it was I was curious as to why people persisted in doing things which were difficult and weren't succeeding, and when they gave up, they gave it up altogether. As I discovered in the services early on, if you feel you're being attacked by someone who's in a better position, you get pretty rough with it, and it leads to a fight. But no animal does this in this way. These are the things we now have to learn. The more varied is the team, the more certain it is if it collaborates to solve the problem. And the more destruction it will do if it doesn't agree with the extreme. We all can make mistakes. So as a leader, how do you now cope? Almost all the leaders I came across believed that I was junior and therefore wasn't to be taken into account. But if it can find leaders who think he's an accountant, I'll put the question to him and see what he can say and what he can do. He's here because he's better than I am on this work, and therefore the better I use him, that's the thing that has to come, then the more certain we are likely to succeed. And once you've got that operating, there are certain teams that I came across who really work with one another and spend a lot of time honouring one another. When you get that operation, what amazed me was that the leader became more powerful, not less.
This period of his life saw him in a multitude of different countries where he added more than a smattering of Italian, German and Greek to his native English and his fluent Arabic. Generally this was used to charm the ladies, but also to bargain in the marketplace and to explore every new country he went to. His zest for exploration and unquenchable curiosity got him into a lot of trouble. For example, when he was in the services in Egypt, he had the luxury of a Batman, a local lad who was supposed to look after his shoes, make sure he ate, washed his clothes, that kind of thing. However, it seems that this Batman was given other duties to do, and they extended to such things like smuggling him into a harem during a wedding. Fortunately, neither of them got caught. If he talked about this period of his life at all, it was mostly to retell stories of a deserted Pompeii, a nearly empty Parthenon in Greece, or his trips to the pyramids in Cairo. The Second World War had a profound effect on anyone alive at that time. My father, only just out of being a teenager, was sent to Germany as part of the Allied occupation forces. He didn't talk about this time in his life, but any vestige of religious belief was lost there in the war zone. He found conditions in Germany appalling, with mass starvation of the Germans. He saw the opening of the concentration camps and all their horrors. He was deeply shocked by how quickly people can dehumanise others, and by the overt racism and believed superiority amongst the British ranks, especially towards the defeated Germans. Of course, this stayed with him always and influenced his lifelong work. Finally, he joined my grandmother and his sister in New Zealand, where, as a demobbed serviceman, he was able to get a place at the university to study psychology. He was, at the time, working full-time in the civil service in order to pay his way. He returned to England at the age of 30 to eventually become director of the Acton Society. He used to say that his job reference said, "Kirton is good in a crisis, and if there isn't a crisis, he will create one." Everyone who knew him well knows how true that reference really is. It is not surprising by now he had developed some traits which many will recognise in the older man. For example, his need to control and micromanage, born out of a complete lack of control of the major events which in his life so far, and by a continual movement from country to country and house to house. He desperately sought stability. So it was fortunate that around about this time he met my mother, the wonderful Veronica, and many of this esteemed audience will have met, been entertained by, or spoken to her over the many years. At last he found stability with a love of his life and someone who could give him the security he lacked in all of his early years. They say behind every great man there is a great woman. Well, my mother is certainly that, and he knew it. He was lucky to have her. At last he had found a secure foundation on which to build a future for himself and start a family. My parents were married for over 60 years and raised 5 children, with me being the eldest and the one who went to work in his office at the age of 14. And I haven't escaped since, even after him passing. He joined Hertfordshire University in 1962, establishing both the psychology department and the management faculty. Additionally, he was also instrumental in setting up Student Health Service in the 1960s to ensure the mental well-being of students at his university, especially as this period saw massive social change, including psychedelic drugs and free love. He later returned to research the challenges of radical change and its impact, both negative and positive, on communities and groups. In 1976, KI saw the light of day, and he dedicated the rest of his life to it. He founded the Occupational Research Centre within the Hertfordshire University, which was dedicated to research alone, mostly in the field of KI, but also in other areas as well. He always had a PhD student at hand. Never quite sure exactly what their role was, but I have a feeling that they both enjoyed and found it difficult to work for him. He was passionate about his work. My mother had to stop him going into the office one Christmas. He hadn't realised that it was a bank holiday and that perhaps the caretaker wouldn't be impressed. Over the years, he came to the conclusion that your KI score is innate, something you're born with and couldn't change. Obviously, you can change your behaviour, but that underlying preference doesn't alter. I was fortunate enough to give birth to twins, so obviously their environment was exactly the same for both. Little Lizzie arrived on the scene, desperate to climb everything, took risks left, right and centre, and one of her first words was try. Her brother, Jonathan, to this day is a conservative eater and tends to watch his older sister, by only 35 minutes, do all the dangerous stuff first to check that he's not going to end up in any severe danger. Interestingly, Nowadays, at the age of 18, they have not changed one iota. She is the one who dyes her hair and has piercings. He is the one who wears a suit to school. Anyway, we digress. My father also realised through his extensive historical studies that KI is as old as humankind. Just as we do now, so they had the full gambit of the adaptation innovation scale. His lectures were littered with historical and military references. You had to be very well read to get all of the in-jokes in his courses. But his purpose was clear. People don't change over the generations. Our children and our children's children will have to deal with their own AI preferences and come to realise that society and they need a full range for us to be successful. So, to misquote a phrase that I used earlier regarding my mother, behind every great innovator, there's an efficient adapter. Behind every great adapter, there is a thought-provoking and challenging innovator. MJK reached out to so many, and I am delighted that some old friends and colleagues have sent in their memories and personal tributes to him today. There are some common threads running through these tributes, such as his intellectual rigour, his sense of humour. His eyes danced with delight when he was regaling an audience with a funny story, and his ability to keep an entire lecture hall enthralled with his every word. This being very important because you definitely were not allowed to miss a single word. He was very good at lecturing, and I was on the receiving end of many of them during my life. We fell out badly over my choice of husband, who at the time was not promising material, I admit. However, I can be as stubborn as my father was, and he met his match in me on this occasion. Ironically, it is Angus who ran and continues to run the day-to-day business of KAI, who was responsible for getting the online version up and running, and who at every Christmas was prepared to debate Socrates with him over our Christmas lunch. So happy endings can happen. My father was a stickler for doing things properly, whether it was framing your research question correctly or making a cup of tea. Anyone in his immediate circle of valued friends and colleagues was initiated into the proper way to make tea. You couldn't be a graduate student with him until you had mastered this art to his satisfaction. I mention this in advance of a number of clips of film here, as they will baffle anyone who hasn't been taught this skill by him personally. Also to be done properly was his research, with the right methods and sound statistics. I have a degree in mathematics, but even I was cautious about challenging his amazing knowledge in this area. The rigour has meant that KAI is one of the most robust, well-researched measures available. It has stood the test of time because of his thoroughness and his willingness to challenge and challenge and challenge again. He collaborated with many researchers and universities over the years, in many countries from all corners of the world. I was involved with some of these collaborations, including Virginia Tech, Eckerd College in Florida, ISU, Penn State, Florida University, the Open University, Cambridge University, just to mention a few. I would like to introduce a tribute from Peter Hammerschmidt, whom I met in Florida at Eckerd College, and Guido Prato Previde from Italy.
Hello, my name is Peter Hammerschmidt. I'm a professor of economics at Eckerd College in St. Petersburg, Florida. I first met Michael Kirton, I think it was about 1988, 89, when I was going through a course under his direction here at Eckerd College. In any event, my first interaction with Michael was when he was in another room and I heard his voice, but hadn't yet met him. And candidly, to my untrained American ear, I thought Cary Grant was in the other room. And turned the corner and was surprised to see Michael, small in stature, but huge in intellect and certainly in commitment toward his work. So after going through that course, Michael made sure to disabuse me of many of my preconceived notions, such as I thought creativity and innovation might be the same word, and led us through a week of rather intensive study. I came to really enjoy not only his energetic teaching, but the intellect behind it. Just extraordinary in terms of his insight and pushing against the common understanding of problem solving or creative problem solving. So I not only enjoyed Michael quite a bit, actually enjoyed the assessment, the KAI, quite a bit. My real appreciation for Michael came when I was able to gather so much data and information from the many executives that went through our leadership programs, and was able to actually work with groups without letting them know that I was setting up the groups based on KAI scores. And working with Michael, we were able to gather over 1,000 different individuals and look at group problem solving success rates as it correlated with the KAI. That led to a publication for me, which I've been able to really refer to quite a bit. And then another publication came along in the book Impact of Leadership, where I was trying to correlate leadership effectiveness ratings with KAI scores. And I was really quite distraught to telephone Michael one day to tell him I could find no correlation with leadership effectiveness and KAI scores. I thought he'd be disappointed to hear that, and yet he was quite enthused as he pointed out to me what I was missing, and that is leadership effectiveness is not a matter of style alone. It is a matter of choosing the appropriate behavior. So with that in mind, I really learned in my economics that problem solving is what we humans do, and that style matters, but that style can also change based upon our choice of behavior if we're willing to spend the energy to do it. So with that in mind, I have now used the KAI in virtually all of my classes and all of my work around the world. So the KAI has not only been a gift to me, it's been a gift to the many people that I've had the pleasure of working with throughout my career. And as I've come to realize the value of people on all areas of the scale, as well as our choice where we want to be on the scale, I would say that the KAI probably has saved my life. I'm a pilot and a mountain climber, and I have a preference as a 121 on the KAI scale. And I've learned playing to that side of the scale is no way to fly a plane or to climb a mountain. So I've adapted many of the more adaptive behaviors literally to save my life. There are reasons we have checklists and safety rules and procedures. But in another way, in a professional way, the KAI has given me life. It's given me an extraordinary excitement in what I do. As I've said, I use it in all of my classes, and I have found that that little instrument, 33 questions, 32 that count, provides more information in a short time for people than any other assessment with which I've ever worked. So I can't thank Michael enough. He knows that before he passed, and I shall miss him deeply. Thank you all for carrying on his work. It is vital.
I remember we met Michael and me in Berkhamsted many years ago, in the beautiful house of Kirton's family. And for us it was the occasion to know each other, to talk, and to build some collaborative relationship. So I've been studying since then the adaptation innovation, validating, bringing it to Italy, and making some research, collaborating with Michael. Michael was, has been really a master for me. I learned a lot in psychology, research, statistics, and so on. He was a great colleague because he was involving me. We were discussing, as we were peers, discussing and thinking about future research. He also has been a mentor in some critical moments. He was coming to Italy from time to time, and let me tell you a brief story about our collaboration and our friendship also. We were waiting for a tea at the bar, so the waiter was coming after some minutes with a teapot, of course, with 2 cups and tea bags, and he was putting just under our eyes, He was putting the tea bag into the teapot and squeezing with a spoon the tea bags in order to make darker and quicker, in a quick way darker the tea. Michael was upset and simply, and laughing, simply was saying, "Is this tea? This is a pirate." Ironically, as usual, bright and ironic.
In his final years, he forged a partnership with Virginia Tech, with the first certification courses being hosted there way back in 2013. Since that first course, the Centre of Co-operative Problem Solving has been established, with KAI at its heart. I am delighted to be co-hosting this symposium with the Centre and joining forces with its director, Dr Kurt Friedel, and Associate Director, Dr Megan Seibel. I think now will be a lovely time to hear from both of them.
I still remember the first time I met Dr. Kirton. It was in a meeting down in Florida to discuss my dissertation proposal. In our meeting, he indicated that my use of citations resembled shotgun splatter. After some time, I indicated that his new textbook was missing key references. We quickly had a mutual understanding about our limitations. We then carried on about the nuanced differences between the words impede and inhibit, and which word did I mean to use in my dissertation. The truth is, no one has helped me more to become a better writer than Dr. Kirton. It was Sir Isaac Newton who said that if I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. And so, Dr. Kirton, thank you for letting us all stand on your shoulders.
I'm Megan Seibel, Associate Director of the Center for Cooperative Problem Solving at Virginia Tech. After years of regular conversations with Dr. Kirton to glean tidbits of information about his theory, I had the privilege of traveling to his home in 2017 to help archive decades worth of support materials for transit to the U.S. At one point during the visit, he turned to me and said, "I think this work is amazing, don't you? I'm just so pleased with how it all turned out." What was an affinity for this theory instantly transformed from something academic to something far more personal. Thank you, Dr. Kirton, for your contributions to the world, and thank all of you for helping us continue this great work.
Thank you, Megan and Curt. You have both been inspirational to work with, and I am delighted that I am sharing this KAI journey with you. I would also like to pay tribute to Priscilla Wolfe. Dr. Wolfe has been an instrumental part of the success of KAI, working with us for many years. Unfortunately, due to personal reasons, she cannot be with us today, but she sends on her regards and hopes that you are all well. However, I would like to take this opportunity to say that my father could not have achieved as much without her over the many years that they worked together. He valued her as a wonderful teacher, with her diligence, her attention to detail, kindness and empathy. For me, I have loved having her as a colleague, and dare I say it, her adaptiveness has made sure that I have kept on the straight and narrow. She is, and will continue to be, an invaluable asset to the KAI team, and especially to our teaching cohort. She, along with a Sparky, Dr Catherine Jablikoff, kept the KAI show rolling, and were both there to assist some delegates who had been at a loss, shall we say, during one of my father's many tangential explanations, or possibly even a ticking off. "Right, sir, why aren't you taking notes? You won't remember if you don't," was a favourite quote of my father's. MJK, as he was known to many, and myself owe a great debt of gratitude to both Priscilla and Catherine.
Hello there, my name is Rob Sheffield. I'm a UK-based trainer and consultant working in the broad space of the leadership of innovation, and I got trained in AI theory in 2004, have administered since then more than 3,000 KAIs, which is about one every working day. I'm going to share with you the story of working with a highly adaptive senior leader in a UK hospital. Ted got some feedback on our leadership program and found out he was in the top quartile of most adaptive people. People wait in our department until the inpatient ward says we have a space, and we let them in. That was the standard. My colleague Joe, a stronger innovator, said, why can't we get every single ward to take one extra patient? Then we're spreading the risk and sharing the load and making it better for all the patients. I asked Ted what's been the effect of the change. This winter, when headlines were about A&E is falling over, colleagues are phoning me from around the region asking, how have you managed this? We were ahead of the game. I'm not an innovator, said Ted, but I try and help people who are. I just need to play to my strengths, and that's okay. And that's why we use adaptation and innovation in our work, because people can learn it quickly, and when they apply it with thought, it brings desirable results. And I think that's the best legacy of the work of the wonderful Dr. Michael Kirton.
Okay, back to his nibs. An arcane term he enjoyed, and he liked many of those. My father was generous with his time for anyone who wanted to pick his brains or ask his advice. But you had to be careful what you wished for. Before you knew it, you had agreed to a long list of interesting tasks and then was asked to publish what you had found. Obviously, he would proofread it for you and gently put you right where you might have wandered or failed to grasp some subtlety or other. However, for his disciples, this experience was a refreshing and enjoyable experience, much as being exfoliated might be. And each student left with a spring in their step, a book under their arm, and an unexpected purpose in life.
My name is Diane Houle-Rutherford. I first met Dr. Kirton about 25 years ago during my first certification program. What the start of an incredible learning journey for me. Over the years, I got to admire the researcher that he was. I learned from him as an educator. I had the privilege of working with him as a colleague, and I grew. He was my mentor. He always had the time for me to discuss a situation, an opportunity. I would say his intellectual rigor is really the hallmark of this giant in our field. His support and his belief in me over the years, I will never forget. I'll cherish for the rest of my life. Thank you so much, Michael.
He was awarded the DSc by Her Royal Highness, the Princess Royal, on behalf of the Council of 4 National Academic Awards in the UK. It was an accolade he was very proud of. My mother and I attended the ceremony as his guests, and on that day, his smile was wider than the Cheshire Cat's.
Hi, I'm Deborah Pettry. Michael Kirton was one of the most original thinkers I've ever known, and he was a pleasure to be with as well. I was first introduced to his theories and assessment in 1987, and I used the knowledge both for myself, to understand myself, but also to understand the people in context I was around. I've been able to help hundreds of other people get the same learning from that over the years. Michael and I didn't always agree, but he was always respectful and he always stimulated my thinking. I miss that, and I miss his sparkling eyes.
He wrote many books, and there are literally hundreds of research papers published. This legacy he leaves us. He was also a fantastic communicator and teacher. I invite you to watch a rare piece of footage of him lecturing on a certification course in the UK.
Okay, what is it? And if you take advice from the greats, in this particular case Kelly, who says that in any good definition there are 2 items that define it positively and one that says what it isn't. What it is, 2 things what it is and 1 thing what it isn't, and that makes sure that you know where the dividing line is. Which item do you pick which isn't? The one most likely to be confused. So in that case we will have what is and what is not. And then we find the simplest possible way of putting it across. So it is the preferred. And then sort of almost like an important little aside, stable. Way or manner? I don't know which you prefer. I tend to use both, but put down manner. The manner in which you bring about change. Now, the preferred stable manner of bringing about change. Now, what is it not? If it's the preferred way of doing, then it is not necessarily behavior. Notice the correct spelling. In other words, that's what you prefer to do, but that's not always what you will do, because you may have to behave in a way you don't prefer. So can you see the distinction straight away? The second thing is stable. Now, before, at the moment we're giving you the general statements. I'm not in a position to be able to prove anything, because before we can prove anything, first of all, we have to have a hypothesis or a statement that we need to check, and this is what we're doing. And then two, we need a measure, and we haven't got the measure yet. We should get on to the measure. Once we've got the measure, then we can carry out the tests and the proofs. And so for the moment, just accept that this is how I think it should be. And then later, once we've got the measure, we can say, right, can we test it? So here we have the problem of it's stable, but behavior is flexible. Therefore, one thing it is not level. And all the research shows, and once again, we'll have to come to it in order to prove it, but all the research shows that these two are not related. If I know the manner in which you go about it, I do not know any of your levels, whatever they are. Your rank, your knowledge, your interests, anything of that kind. And if I know these, I don't know the manner.
My father created, by accident or by design, a worldwide KI community. This community came together last year to support my mother and my family after his death. We have been overwhelmed with the kindness you have shown us, and also been amazed by how many feel indebted to him in some way.
Hi, I'm Sam Crouse, and I've been involved with KAI for 30 years, having used it in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. The KAI we found was very precise and also understandable, and it really solved the problem that we had was the diversity of problem-solving styles that we had. It took care of that problem B for us, and we were able to really be successful in that effort. I believe had it not been for the KAI, we would have not been successful as much. So I'm very excited that Nicola is carrying on the work of her father, and also that Virginia Tech has become the center for the KAI in the US, and look forward to much more to come with the KAI.
A week before he died, he said to my mother, we should all leave this world a better place than we found it. I can safely say that he has done that, and his legacy will live on through you.
Now then, my lad, what questions have you got for me? That's the way every conversation would start with Dr. Kirton for the past 25 years. His head would tilt, and his voice would lilt up as he drew to the end of his answer, always terminating with a Then, while I thought about what he'd said, he'd inject, "Oh, you might want to write that down," and I did, of course. I came with one sheet of questions, but I always left with a sheaf of actions, all given by him, naturally. When we lunched about 5 years ago, we talked about great leaders and mortality. I asked him, "Dr. Kirton, what will happen if I've got questions to ask of you, but you're in the next world, trying to get angels onto a certification course? Then you'll have to wrestle with the problem yourself, my lad, like I did with Management Initiative. And after you've found the answers, you'll have to publish. You must publish, publish, publish. But if I'm still around, you should send it to me so I can check what you're saying about my work first. He was always in control, always in charge. In fact, the only time I've ever seen him thrown and uncomfortable was the time he gave me a compliment, and I threatened to hug him to mark this special occasion. He didn't like that. When I saw him last August, he was clearly frail but buoyed. Perhaps it was the prospect of giving somebody else something to do which energized him. After some pleasantries, he asked me, have you brought me anything you published, young lad? Sadly, no, I said. He gazed at me for about 5 seconds, then sighed, and turned to Veronica and said, I think we'll take tea now. I think of him every day. I loved him so dearly. I'm going to miss him a great deal. He had such a big influence on my life. Dr. Kirton, thank you very much.